This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Over the rainbow, gotta let it go. So go. Fast to finger down. Dance tonight together. Here everyone is singing. 你看到我就怕，头皮发麻，我的手。
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate, Rewind and Rewatch, covering Open the Southern Gate from Burlington, North Carolina on April 1st, 2011. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling Network RSS feed or on our own Open the Voice Gate dedicated RSS feed on every podcast platform and application applicable. If you want to donate to the show, we would greatly appreciate it. Go to redcircle.com or the link in the show notes, and you can give a one-time or reoccurring donation. You can find us on Twitter at OpenVoiceGate. I am one of your hosts. It's your old pal, Iron Mike Spears. I'm joined as always by my co-host, Case Lowe. And Case, how do you feel about now that we're going down south for DGUSA?
I'm approaching Mike Spears territory at a rapid descent. Judging from some of the choice architecture on this venue's wall, I would say I don't feel totally safe at the Mid-Atlantic Sportatorium. I don't know if you noticed the same things I did about this venue.
Yeah.
It would be one Confederate flag hanging in the corner that I could not take my eyes off of the entire show. Every time they cut to it, it is the only thing I could focus on. But we are going down south. We are heading to the Spears territory. It is North Carolina. It is Open the Southern Gate. And it is Wrestlemania Weekend 2011, which I am very, very excited to talk about this triple shot that DGUSA had.
Yeah, just so for like a frame of reference, I know where that venue was, and we can talk more about it because I have my opinions when we get into the show itself. Yeah, that part of North Carolina was close to where I went to undergrad, and, you know, it's something where, like, I'm glad we live in 2020 where people are having the necessary just reckoning over the Confederate battle flag and how just fucking racist it is, for lack of a better words. Pardon my French. But, yeah, no, that does not surprise me when I saw that. I was like, oh, yeah, that's terrible. So... yeah.
It's one of those things that, like, even before I knew the meaning behind the flag, I've always had a bit of a bias towards the South. So I was like, oh, that's a Southern thing. It's dumb. But I do think about it. There's certainly not beacons of hope in this dull world, but Ring of Honor and Sinclair Broadcasting and the Briscoe brothers, like a few years ago, they released a compilation where the cover is just the Briscoes with like a Confederate flag background behind them. That's like 2014. Like that is not that long ago.
Right.
And again, I mean, it's, you know, we're changing. It's for the better. I'm not gonna gatekeep any sort of progression. When you can get on board, you can get on board. But yeah, it was very distracting this entire show. Whenever they would cut to the corner cam, it's like, oh my God, there's a Confederate flag in the background. Okay, all right, let's focus on the wrestling.
Yeah, no, it was something that was out of place then, I would say, and even more out of place nowadays. How do you want to start off with show notes? I do have one thing coming out of New York City before we want to talk about the rest of February and March and Dragon Gate and across the world.
Oh, please give me your New York City note.
All right, so this comes from the February 14th, the Valentine's edition of The Observer from 2011, and this is about the iPay-per-view. We've talked about the rise of iPay-per-view over the series, and this was the last weekend, this being the United weekend, of them using iPay-per-view on the Go Fight Live platform, and this is what Dave Meltzer said. The two iPay-per-view shows, which were, for the listeners, that was the New York City show from BB King's and the Philadelphia show from the 2300 Arena. The two iPay-per-view shows did virtually identical numbers. They did a few hundred, maybe 450 or 500 on iPay-per-view for January 28th in New York and January 29th in Philadelphia. The two shows were only 2 buys apart, so one would guess it was the same 450 to 500 people each night. The number was down 30% from the first iPay-per-view, but these shows were also announced just days ahead, so there was little promotion. Plus, doing 2 in one weekend kind of diluted each. So they've now have pretty much focused onto the iPay-per-views now, and we've seen, just like attendance, that initial interest, at least for January, that it was a pretty stark drop. I think they were doing about 700 for the first ones, and the first one was in Boston, right? It was the first one in Boston.
Yes.
So we're already starting to see that the one tail of the promotion, at least through the first 17 shows, I think it's fair to say, my finances and money was never on DGUSA's side.
No, it's just such a stark decline in business, and part of what is fascinating to me about this project in particular is, the narrative has been after, the first 3 or 4, even if you want to extend it to WrestleMania weekend, the first 6 DGUSA shows, not only does business go down, but quality goes down. And I think, with the exception of, the end of 2010, that Northeast double shot, where those shows weren't bad, but they weren't the strongest. And then you had United Finale, the prior show we talked about, which I wasn't crazy about at all outside of one match. But it's not like these shows are bad. In fact, I think most of them are very good. I loved both United New York and United Philly. I think the talent in play right now between Yamato and Tozawa and Pac and Ronin, there's a lot of exciting things in this promotion. And this is still, we're 2 years away from me following the promotion. I was really only actively following it for the last year of its existence. So I can only hypothesize that, or at least hope that in 2011, had I been aware of the promotion, that I would be a huge fan, that I would be watching, because again, these shows are very, very good. And yes, it's easy to say with hindsight, oh, well, it's Johnny Gargano. Why didn't you care? It's Chuck Taylor. How could you not care? I understand they were new stars at the time, but they're guys that I think have acclimated themselves to the promotion and the house style incredibly, incredibly well. And I'm just so surprised to see the continual dip in business, because yes, they broke into the New York City market, but that only lasts for so long because that building was so expensive to run. And it essentially came down, as Gabe has said, people weren't buying enough food and drinks at the BB King show, so they had to stop running there. But it just seems like everywhere they go, things are getting worse and worse and worse. And you even compare it to WrestleMania weekend 2010, which, as we talked about then, we thought the crowds were kind of sparse for that weekend. It wasn't a huge turnout, but look at the building they were running, the Celebrity Theater in Phoenix, and a year later, they're running the Mid-Atlantic Sportatorium, which is not a shot on that building. I actually think the venue has some positives to it, but just optically, it is such a stark change in Dragon Gate USA that if you're only watching the promotion from afar, it literally looks like things have gotten so much worse, even if the in-ring product isn't representing that.
Yeah, and we've talked about it, especially with the Chicago and Milwaukee shows, about how bad, in some cases, the production got. And if you're like a person that's looking in from the outside, although the ring work and I would say the talent development is worth watching, production-wise, this is 2011 we're talking about. I think WWE went to HD in 2010. I want to say
either 2009 or 2010.
Right, so it's still recent. That's fine for my point I was going to make. It's about, you have these products out there that, in a real lull in wrestling, that had proper production that looked decent. I mean, TNA, I believe, was soon to go to HD, and of course, Ring of Honor was on HDNet. And then you have this promotion, if you compare them side by side to an outside observer, you're not going to pick DGUSA. And I feel like that's something that, as the further we get into this, you kind of see the same production. It's something I keep on going back to, is it's something that I don't necessarily think, production wise, it was made to succeed in that regard, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, it's something that, God, I mean, you and I and Rich Craich of Voices of Wrestling, I mean, especially during the Flow Slam days, we'd spent so much time talking about, if you put the three of us in that building with my limited production background and your extensive and Rich's extensive production background, we could make these shows look really good. And it's just something that, even when Gabe had the financial opportunity to make his shows look major league, he opted for lasers instead, and then seemed to cut corners in every single other aspect of the presentation. And we're in 2011. We've talked about on pretty much every episode how, you know, they're not hitting their attendance goals. iPay-per-views are down. This weekend is their last televised pay-per-view. Like, it's, you know, it's understandable to think that there's not a ton of cash flow coming in, but this is 2011 and YouTube has been around and digital marketing is a thing at this point. And it was just something that they were never able to capitalize on. I mean, Gabe doesn't go to HD until the beginning of 2014. So we get the last 4 Dragon Gate USA shows in HD, but there's approximately, I believe, 1 Dragon Gate talent on those shows combined. I believe it's just Yosuke Santa Maria. So Gabe is dealt a bad hand, yes. I mean, you know, it's calmed down a little bit, but we'll talk about it in future episodes of the talent turnover that comes out of this weekend. Obviously, the first 6 months of the promotion are all Gabe building up these American stars and then the American stars leaving. I understand that he was dealt some bad hands, but he's just not making it any better on himself.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think that's like an important point to come back to. Like, there were all these environmental factors, but there are things that, I mean, hey, we should talk to Courage and say, hey, how about we put ourselves out there, you pay us a block amount of your money, and we'll make your shows not look like shit. You'd be surprised what you can do with good scrims and actual lighting things while making things sound great, you know?
Mike, I'm a really good employee. I take direction really well. If you and Rich tell me how to make a professional wrestling venue look nice, it is going to look damn good by the time I'm done. I just need the direction.
I mean, here we go. This is what we're doing here. We're playing out future businesses here as we're watching one business slowly slide into irrelevancy.
If we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. We are learning from the cardinal sins of Dragon Gate USA in order to start our own wrestling promotion. That is the point of this podcast.
And I will say this for our wrap-up. There is a new cardinal sin that I have for the show that we will talk about as we get into it. So that was it from at least notes coming out of United Weekend. Case, you want to take us around the world?
Yes, indeed. We're going to go to the Dragon Gate USA Newswire for our first bit of timeline stuff, and then we will go abroad to Japan to cover everything that happened between the end of February and the beginning of April, because it is a lot in a 1 month span. But we do have to go back to December 10th, 2010, when Gabe announces that Dragon Gate USA is pleased to announce that we are heading to North Carolina on Friday night, April 1st at the Mid-Atlantic Sportatorium. You will see DGUSA live. We look forward to carrying on the tradition of great pro wrestling by presenting something completely new in North Carolina. And then after the United Weekend, January 31st, we get the major players of the weekend. The first talent that is announced, and it is the Open, the Freedom Gate champion Yamato. It is the Open, the United Gate champions Masato Yoshino and Pac. It is Shima and Naruki Doi of Blood Warriors, Ronin of Chuck Taylor, Johnny Gargano, and Rich Swann, Akira Tozawa, and a man who is not on this show, but is a featured player on the Atlanta shows, Stalker Ichikawa, makes his Dragon Gate USA debut. From there, we go to February 2nd when Gabe announces the first ever Stable Shootout is coming to Burlington, North Carolina on April 1st. The Stable Shootout will pit Blood Warriors of Shima, Naruki Doi, and Ricochet versus Ronin of Chuck Taylor, Johnny Gargano, and Rich Swann. Each team will get to put the other team through a series of challenge matches, and the 3 matches are this. Now, Mike, I will read you what Gabe typed verbatim, and then we can analyze it from here, okay?
All right, let's
Number
go.
one, yes. Number 1, a one-on-one battle between one member of each stable. Simple enough.
Sure.
Yes. Number 2, a dream partner tag team match, but you must pick someone from outside your stable. I understand that.
Yeah, not complicated there.
Number 3, this is actually 2 matches. Each stable will get to book a member of the opposing team against any available opponents. Mike, I watched this show and then did these notes, and I did not know what Gabe meant until I actually looked back at the card. Number 3, this is actually 2 matches. Why not just say it's a 4-match series then, Gabe? Why would you do this?
I mean, this is like Gabe at like his peak Gabe. He was feeling himself with this idea. Like, can't you see him getting into MailChimp or whatever he used for that time, going like, all right, I have to tell him this awesome idea. It's a Stable Shootout. The first one-on-one. All right, Gabe, we're with you there. Number 2, dream partners be able to pick from outside your stable. Okay, that's gonna be interesting there. Like you can see like what was a first-time matchup. All right, let's go with this. Number 3. This is actually 2 matches, and it's a you select opponent match. What the fuck, Gabe Sapolsky?
It's the most roundabout way to get to such a simple concept where he says the 3 matches are, and then follows that up after 2 matches with, well, there's actually 2 matches. Oh, Gabe, God bless you. But those matches of the Stable Shootout, they turned out to be the matches that we'll talk about in just a little bit. The Dream Partner tag match of Pac and Ricochet versus Chuck Taylor and Akira Tozawa. The Blood Warriors versus Ronin one-on-one match. Shima versus Giant Gargano in a rematch from the first anniversary show. The opponent that Ronin picked for Naruki Doi, it is Naruki Doi versus Jon Moxley. And the Blood Warriors pick for Rich Swann is Sami Callihan versus Rich Swann. So that's what we have to look forward to. But again, we've got a little bit more news before we get to that, including an announcement on February 14th that Chicago's Untouchable show from September 25th, 2010 is now available on DVD for immediate shipping. And then February 16th, it is announced that the following night show, Way of the Ronin, is also now shipping for DVD. So, Mike, that is a 5-month gap between DVD purchases, or between the show and the release of the DVD, rather. Is that normal for the time period? Because this already seems like they are drastically falling behind on DVDs.
Well, yes and no. I mean, Smart Mark Video was the major independent wrestling provider, as they were basically up until when IWTV really took over, and then people going do individual stuff on Fight TV. And they would be able to do a pretty quick turnaround because they would burn on DVD-Rs, which for the younger listeners here, those are the DVDs that have the purple and blue background. They're the ones that are cheap, and they're the ones that always degrade fastest because they're made basically to be printed in your computer. The thing was, PWG always had a huge delay, but they also always did like master-produced DVDs, which are a lot like the DVDs you'll see in store where they have the silver and goldish background because they recorded on a different format. And that's what DGUSA did as well. Like, case I'm certain that whenever you look through your DGUSA DVDs, you see like, okay, this actually looks like it's a pretty like professionally done thing. Smart Mark basically was printing onto DVD-Rs and then putting it through like a DVD label printer. So
that makes a little bit of sense, yeah. Because I mean that's the thing. It's so unfortunate that the DGUSA DVDs took so long to get because they always looked very, very good.
So there is that. There is also, we talked earlier about how they had, I forget which episode, I think this was in the wrap-up 20th episode where we talked about how they were eliminating the bonus DVD and they're eliminating the production cost there. Like, the idea there was that it was supposed to, like, expedite things, I think, but also, like, cut down costs because you don't have, like, the thin, because they always use the thin cases, DGUSA did, versus, like, the standard DVD cases, the thin ones. And it's something where, like, I could tell, like, why they're trying to do this and like this. Also, at least for that Chicago show, that was a pay-per-view. So there's probably some level of exclusivity there from, okay, you have so long from after this is done airing. This was really before VOD happened on cable systems. Some cable systems had VOD, but not necessarily for wrestling. But still, like, the Milwaukee show was just taped for DVD. You could have, like, had that thing out in months unless you were, like, so, like, it can't come out until after Chicago, and we can't release Chicago for X amount of period of time. So those are my 2 guesses about this. I know for certain the DVD mastering process is a more intensive and more expensive deal versus DVD-Rs. But there also might be a pay-per-view component that had them do that as well. But this will be something we'll be talking about for the remainder of the series because, as Kay said, we're coming up on the end of their deal with G-Funk in terrestrial pay-per-view.
Yeah, and I could be wrong, but off the top of my head, I believe there are Dragon Gate USA shows that were just never released on DVD because at one point they fell so far behind, and then Gabe's logic when he rebooted Evolve in 2014 was, forget all the shows we missed, we're starting with DVD production on these shows now. And just there's an entire year of shows, I think, and again, we'll talk about when we get to it, but I think the WrestleMania Weekend 2013 shows and Mercury Rising, which had the Shingo Tozawa match where everybody watched from the corner because they were afraid they were going to miss WrestleMania. I think that's the last DGUSA show on DVD. I don't believe the last 8 shows actually made it to press. I think they just exist digitally, which is hard to believe, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We do have an update on Chikara, as on February 21st, Gabe announces Chikara Sekigun has disbanded. The doors open for the unit to return down the road. The relationship with Chikara and DGUSA remains strong. Mike Quackenbush sent us this statement. And this is, I will not do a Mike Quackenbush impression, but just have in mind his apology video as I read this quote. It is with a heavy heart that I must take a leave of absence from Dragon Gate USA. As half of the Chikara Tag Team Champions with Jigsaw, my focus and concentration must go in that direction. My changing focus, however, does not indicate the end of a partnership between Dragon Gate and Chikara, simply a new phase of its evolution. So, Mike Quackenbush, dominating the PR game since 2011. Mike, do you have any sad feelings on Chikara going away?
Well, I'm sad because I don't think that a lot of the Chikara people were put into opportunities that they could succeed at. And we've seen post this point of people who have been Chikara people who have stopped by, who have ended up, doing great things after DGUSA and after Chikara. And, that's the frustrating thing, I feel like. We pretty much the story of the first 10 episodes of this podcast where, wow, Quack not looking so good in 2020. Little did we know that other things would make him not look so good in 2020. But, Jigsaw, we're like, why is Jigsaw not doing more of Jigsaw, not doing more of Jigsaw? So that's, the thing I come back to is I don't know if, the Chikara... I think the Chikara people are basically expected to kind of be what Ronin become, but they just either didn't mesh or they weren't set up to succeed or just various reasons there. So I'm not going to miss having a bad Mike Quackenbush promo and Mike Quackenbush getting eaten alive in the style that he professes he's great at, but then someone who actually trained in the style, not just on seminars, came and ate his lunch. So I feel bad. I wish we had more Jigsaw. That's my big takeaway.
Jigsaw pops up here and there. So it's the end of any Jigsaw push is now, but Jigsaw at least has some more appearances throughout the promotion. He does not appear, however, in the Breakout Challenge, which will happen on this Open the Southern Gate show. February 28th, it is announced that DGUSA will present the Breakout Challenge on April 1st at Burlington, North Carolina. DGUSA will give someone a chance to break out from the pack. It will be 8 wrestlers in 2 4-way freestyle matches. The winners will then collide later on in the card in a singles match to determine who will break out. And both freestyles have been signed, and it is Eric Cannon, AR Fox, Facade, and Shima Zion in the first one, and Jimmy Rave, John Davis, Kyle Matthews, and Sugar Dunkerton in the second. So, Mike, that is all of the relevant news pertaining directly to Open the Southern Gate, but to, I guess, paint a picture for not only the wrestling landscape, but literally with what we're about to talk about, the world landscape at the time. We have to shift to Japan. March 1st, 2011, Korakuen Hall, Dragon Gate. We have the debut of Ronin in Japan on a card that I will read you real quick. Chuck Taylor, Rich Swann, and Giant Gargano win the opening match against Shima, Naruki Doi, and Naoki Tanizaki. Masato Yoshino defeated Super Shisa. BB Hulk and Susumu defeated Don Fuji and Kenichiro Rai, and Taka Michinoku and Minoru Fujita. We talked on the last show about how that was supposed to be Nozawa Ron Guy, but Nozawa stole a taxi, and thus Minoru Fujita was put in his spot. The first singles match the first singles match in Dragon Gate between Pac and Ricochet for the Open the Brave Gate title. Pac defended the title there. A loser revive survival elimination match between Blood Warriors and Kamikaze, in which Kamikaze came out on top. And then an Open the Dream Gate #1 contendership match, Masaki Mochizuki defeating Gamma in the main event of a Korakuen Hall show. Mike, what are your memories of this show?
So this is one of the shows from this that I've not rewatched, but I remember pretty fondly. The Ronin entrance was very kind of we will talk a little bit in a couple minutes more about Ronin's time in Japan, but it was such a thing at that time, seeing Chuck Taylor, Johnny Gargano, and Rich Swann being brought in and being brought into a force. I mean, beating Shima, Naruki Doi, and Naoki Tanizaki is a pretty strong feat for them, so at least you could tell that was a big thing. I remember the Yoshino and Shisa match not being what I was hoping for. I think that match...
That's a shame, because that match looks really fun on paper.
Yeah. The Brave Gate match, I mean, they would do better, I believe, but that was a fun match between Pac and Ricochet. The big match, takeaway, the best match in the show, and it's a format that Dragon Gate doesn't do very often, was the 8-man tag team loser revives survival elimination match, which we're going to get to a period where we're going to have to explain a lot of different elimination matches, Case. Just explain what's going on in Japan. And it's just a cool format, basically. As long as you still had one person in the match, you would be able to get someone back who eliminated. And it kind of made like a really cool dynamic because like they wouldn't leave ringside. Like some of the matches they had them go wait out in the entryway. Some of the places they actually had like a pen for them to stand in. And like this one was like a really fun one. It was like one of the first ones of this. And of course, Masaki Mochizuki winning the contendership for the Dream Gate title. That is, I mean, that was the whole thing about how Gamma was wrestling and it was originally going to be like Brody Lee. And then it was like, I don't care because Gamma didn't want to wrestle there, but Brody Lee wasn't on this tour. So interesting show.
Yes.
Interesting show.
Yeah.
To say at least.
I have not seen anything from this show other than the Pac Ricochet match, because that is one that has always circulated really well. At least I know there's at least a music video of the clipped match on YouTube, but for a while that match was pretty well out there because it's insane. Like Pac and Ricochet will have better matches in 2011 as the year goes on, but this one they are just doing moves. Like it is a bizarre match because even for Pac, who I really post 2007, I mean, once he comes to Dragon Gate for the first time, he loses any sort of like really spotty stuff and becomes just a really solid all-around worker. But this is just Pac and Ricochet doing moves, and it is a ton of fun. But I would like to see that Loser Revives Survival Elimination match. It kind of sounds like traditional dodgeball rules in a sense where I've seen matches like that before, but I haven't seen that particular one. So I would like to hunt down that show and find it.
Do you know what episode of Infinity that is offhand?
No, I do not know off the top of my head.
Fair enough.
Because I looked throughout the dark web this week, could not find this show, but there is footage of the March 4th Osaka Prefectural Gym #2 show, which featured Ryo Saito and Genki Horiguchi defeating Don Fuchi and the future T-Hawk, Super Shisa defeating Yasushi Kanda, Masaki Mochizuki and Kenichiro Arai defeating Dragon Kid and Gamma, Yamato Kagatora Cyber Kong defeating Ronin of Chuck Taylor, Rich Swann, and Giant Gargano. That is a really fun match.
Yeah.
And then another Loser Revives Survival Elimination match, this one between Blood Warriors and World 1, in which Blood Warriors ends up winning, and then after the match, Shima challenges World 1 to put their Triangle Gate titles on the line at the upcoming Sumo Hall show, and World 1 agrees if they lose, they will disband. So a lot happening on this show, Mike.
Yeah, and obviously, like, the top two matches are the ones that are, if you're someone that is able to find it, it's worth watching. Like, Ronin in Japan, it was, like, such an interesting thing, and it's going to be such an interesting thing to, like, look back on, because it's a very divergent kind of thing for these three guys and like their first exposure to Dragon Gate. But I mean, again, like the 8-man tag team Loser Revive survival match is so much, they're really fun because there's a lot of different ways. Like they are over the top rope. So I mean, you can do elimination that way. And there's like a lot of like good little moments here. And then of course, like we're now getting real close to the formal kickoff of Blood Warriors versus Junction 3. So the fact that World 1 was putting their livelihood at stake at this time. And, of course, they've been the Superface unit ever since they formed. So, like, this was, like, a big thing. And, I mean, we don't like, disband matches. Like, usually Dragon Gate will have 1 or 2 a year. But, like, this one, like, and the idea about the World 1 disband match, I remember being like, wow, World 1 is going to disband? Like, at the time, it was like, they just got Kineska. Now Pac is looking even bigger. BB Hulk, who knows what's going to happen with BB Hulk now that he dropped the Freedom Gate? Could they be playing big things for BB Hulk? And then, of course, like Pac there. It was just like one of those things. It's like, this was like a thing like that, at least for the fandom at the time, there were huge stakes going into this disband possibility.
Because World 1 formed what, in the summer of 2008?
Yeah. Because it was because they formed out of the ashes of New Hazard. Because New Hazard became Real Hazard, as that was the whole thing. The day that the Earth stood still, as Shingo Takagi and Cyber Kong turned on BB Hulk, when BB Hulk finally got them to do the BB story dance and came out in costume, and they beat the crap out of them, and they were Triangle Gate champions. They had to vacate that, and then Doyoshi came to save him.
Yeah, I just rewatched that angle, and it is an all-time great pro wrestling angle. I mean, it is up there as an elite tier, like, oh my god, this is why I like this dumb medium. Having Hulk and Kong come out in the BB Hulk get up, do the dance, only to plant him into the mat. It is a brilliant piece of work.
And it's something that we'll be talking about, probably one of the other great turns coming up in probably in the next 3 episodes from now. We'll probably be talking about that.
Yes, so after the Osaka show, there was a Kobe Sambo Hall show on this tour, but it wasn't super important. But all of this was leading up to Sumo Hall Compilation Gate 2011 on a show that was supposed to feature T-Hawk versus Dr. Muscle in a dark match, Tanizaki, Kanda, and Gama versus Chuck Taylor, Rich Swann, Giant Gargano in the opener, Kagetora and Fujita Jr. Hayato versus Super Shenlong and Kotoka, an Open the Brave Gate #1 contender match between Doi and Arakan, your man Mike Taku Iwasa return match, Iwasa and Cyber Kong versus Don Fuji and Super Shisa, a twin gate match between Saito and Horiguchi versus Yamato and Shingo, the aforementioned Triangle Gate versus Unit match with Shima, Ricochet, and Dragon Kid versus BB Hulk, Susumu, and Pac, and the Open the Dream Gate match between Masato Yoshino and Masaki Mochizuki. Mike, this show was supposed to happen on March 20th. Why did it not happen?
Well, on March 11th, 2011, Japan had its greatest natural disaster in modern history when there was a earthquake and a tsunami that really rocked the entire country, mostly in the northeast portion of it. And also these events led to the Fukushima nuclear reactor melting down over a period. I think they said that it was upwards of like trillions of dollars of damage for the Fukushima thing. And it just all kind of like boiled in together. Like you had like the earthquake, and I do have some notes about the earthquake when we get to more talking about it, and how it completely one of the worst earthquakes that people have ever felt. And then the whole entire tsunami completely wiped out Fukushima region to the extent that, I mean, it still has not to this day really kind of recovered. Like there still are parts of the Tohoku area that have not recovered from it, and it's something that ever since then, I mean, it was $360 million or $1 billion as of that day, just under 16,000 deaths, and one of the greater tragedies in modern history.
Yeah, it's something that I certainly remember paying attention to at the time. It's just given my age, and this was 2011, so I was 12 years old at the time, and it's certainly something that I have memories of. And I went back and watched some footage of the disaster today before we started recording, and it was even worse than I remember, quite honestly. I mean, some of the videos I saw were just unbelievably cruel and just terrible. But I think Dave Meltzer in the March 21st Observer had just a good summary of it a week out of kind of everything that happened. It was a 9.0 magnitude earthquake, and with the continued aftershocks, many of which were significant. Then the fear of the radiation link, Dave writes, has threatened life as they know it in parts of the country. While there are those that have noted some of the U.S. coverage has been overblown, as much of the country in the south and west may have been shaken up by the big earthquake, and to a lesser extent the tremors, but were not seriously harmed. Numerous shows were canceled, but it appears nobody within the pro wrestling or MMA community was injured or killed, partially due to luck. Because Japan is earthquake country, its structures are the best equipped in the world to withstand a major earthquake, but this was approximately 30 times more powerful than the last major earthquake in the U.S., the 1989 San Francisco Bay Area earthquake that is remembered for a lot of things, but most notably prematurely ending that year's World Series. Because of structural damage to Korakuen Hall in Tokyo, the center of activity for many wrestling, boxing, and MMA groups, a number of events have been canceled, including a women's boxing show with 3 world championship matches on March 12th and a men's boxing show on March 14th. Yeah, this was the thing about the Bay Area earthquake there, and it being 30 times more powerful than that earthquake, is terrifying to think about.
Well, and this was one of the things that, as Dave is someone that's kind of hit and miss in recent years about cultural issues and global issues, I feel like that this is actually some of Dave's strongest reporting was done during this. I mean, he was able to interview someone like Aaron Aguila, who was on tour for All Japan, or he was able to like take these notes. We had an interview elsewhere where Aaron Aguila is from Southern California, and he was like, this is a quote that he said from this. But it didn't stop shaking, and the guy next to me were saying we're in the earthquake. Being from California, and by the way, he was in All Japan. They were touring that region when this happened, so they were close to what happened, and they were in their tour bus. He said, being from California, with all the earthquakes I've been through, I kind of knew what to expect. but it wouldn't stop and it kept getting worse and worse. It's hard to believe, but the bus almost tipped over. I can't believe it didn't. That's how violent the shaking had gotten. The thing was scariest, though, is that the shaking did not stop for 4 minutes. It was 10 times, 20 times, maybe even 100 times worse than any earthquake I felt back home. The fury was unbelievable. I was thinking that was it. This was the way that God wants me to go. This is it, and I can't believe it. I'm going to die in a bus full of wrestlers 6,000 miles away from my wife, kids, and parents. You know, for the first few years, you think it'll stop soon and there's nothing to worry about. I've been through these before. We've been fine. Then, when it doesn't quit and you watch some of the guys get up out of their seats and start freaking out, you start saying your prayers, preparing maybe to die. So, it is something that left a mark on someone like Aaron Aguila, who was there. And it's something that, I mean, also he talks about that not just like Cork and Hall did it, but Sumo Hall canceled everything because even though they had the preventions there, I mean, there was damage suffered. And I believe Cork and Hall basically for a while, I don't remember when exactly it got started back up, but for a long time, Cork and Hall was, it was available, but then they had to do repairs later, because I know that companies were back in Cork and Hall by May, but it effectively shut down a lot of wrestling, and mostly they had to cancel, Dragon Gate at least, cancel their Sumo Hall, and they weren't able to announce it until the 16th, and I mean, they were running in Kobe area and in Osaka, so it wasn't really affecting them there, but it's something that at least with Dragon Gate, if you're watching these shows along with us, you'll notice that most of the Japanese wrestlers have a pray for Japan and various like different armbands and like things. This Dragon Gate did make like a big effort of fundraising. I don't think any of Dragon Gate's wrestlers at the time were from Owate and Tohoku, but it was something that, like, I mean, even for Dragon Gate, which is known as the Western Japan wrestling company, still like deeply like felt it. And I remember like stuff with like Akira Tozawa when he returned, he like had a part of like the pray. He adapted the pray for Japan stuff, kind of like to like pray for me, because I know that it was something that shook him up really well. I mean, this is a guy who was on excursion in America, and you have to basically hope to get in contact with people. And like one of the big people that kind of became a figure in this was Jinsei Sensaki, because for a while people were worried about him because he's kind of like the big boss of that area, and he owned like ramen restaurants, and he was also involved in Sendai Girls, and he basically got to a point where he immediately was like, I need to help. And he was living in his car basically because he was driving to pick up his ingredients for his ramen restaurant and then providing ramen for people. And he was like, it's just easier for me to sleep in my car. So it's something that I think that it's still a very poignant thing. If you're someone who subscribes on Twitter or social media to any like Japanese wrestler or Japanese fans and trying to keep up with like Puresu, you will see often on 311 a lot of remembrances of it. And it's something that's just it's hard to put in words, like talking to like people, because I mean, like Ronin was on tour in Japan when this happened.
Exactly. Yeah. So Ronin's there, and anytime they are asked about that Dragon Gate tour, because it's the only time Taylor goes to Japan, Gargano.
Oh, Ronin. I mean, Taylor does, but just not for. He was in Japan before for Osaka Pro and Big Japan,
yes,
but this is his only
right.
Dragon Gate.
Yeah, and then does New Japan after the fact. But I think Gargano has at least one more tour. I think it's just one. And then Swan becomes a regular pretty soon after. But anytime they talk about it, they all talked about it in their Kevin Steen show interviews of the panic that came over them and everybody they were surrounded by. I did not know until I was reading The Observer that other Americans were in Japan as well, because Pro Wrestling Noah had Trevor Murdoch, Bill Breaker, and Bobby Fish on tour as well, and they were stuck at the Narita airport for 29 hours, which sounds hellacious, but I had no prior knowledge of those guys being in Japan as well. So it's, you know what, it's something that affected the globe. When we had Jay on the podcast a few months ago, he talked about, he helped work the concessions for Dragon Gate at these Atlanta shows, and they were all doing Pray for Japan. I don't know if merchandise is the right word, but at least some sort of fundraiser. And yeah, it's still something. I mean, I try to keep tabs on a lot of Dragon Gate super fans through Twitter, and every March 11th they have posts about it. It is gut wrenching.
It's something that I don't know if you caught this, but basically when this happened, of course, Sumo Hall was canceled. Compilation Gate. That was going to be like their second time to run, or the third time they were going to run Sumo Hall. Dragon Gate's never been back to Sumo Hall.
Yeah.
And some of that is because of maybe superstition a little bit, but a lot of that was because it was such an expensive endeavor for them, and I don't think they got a refund back for their deposit for it, and for a company that wasn't Tokyo based, that was just an unnecessary expense. And then that's how Champion Gate kind of started up, because Compilation Gate ended, and then Champion Gate would start up with the double shot in Osaka 2 every March and February. So, and I remember, and I don't want to get too ahead of it, but the stories that like Chuck Taylor talked about on his way back from Japan, like, did you have any of that in your notes?
No, I didn't.
So basically, like, Dragon Gate would continue, but they basically sent Ronin home. And like, I believe, I'm just going to check on Cage Match to see how much longer they wrestled there, but they pretty much, like, because the big thing was they were going to be there for 3 weeks, but specifically they were going to be there for the Sumo Hall show. And they stuck around for another like few days, and then they pretty much were like, oh no, because that's when the situation got much worse. Fukushima, the nuclear reactor kind of started to leak and break down, and they're like, we're going to send you home. And they talked about being like, we got sent to the airport with like plane, and we got our plane tickets, but our plane tickets weren't for like 24 hours, but like we couldn't go back because they were all trying to take care of stuff like there, but we had to go home. And Chuck Taylor talked about like, yeah, no, we hung out, I think it was like in the Narita airport for like a full day after, I think their last show they did was in Yamaguchi, and then before they went home. So it's something that, kind of changed a lot of what I imagined the plans were for Ronin, what the plans were for all three of these guys in Japan, because as you said, Rich Swann ends up becoming a regular there for the next 2 to 3 years. Johnny Gargano would be back, but this was it for Chuck Taylor in Japan, at least for Dragon Gate.
Yeah, and as for the rest of that Compilation Gate card, all of the important matches were made up. They did a show in Shinjuku Face on April 12th, I believe, that had the Iwasa return match. The Twin Gate titles were defended eventually. World 1 broke up, and then the Open the Dream Gate match was moved to the April 14th Korakuen. So they were back in Korakuen pretty much a month later,
right.
And that is the show where World 1 breaks up, where Yamato defends the Freedom Gate title against Yasushi Kanda, and then you have an all-time epic, Mochizuki versus Yoshino, Korakuen Hall Dream Gate title match. It's not their best match together. It's actually, the crazy thing is, it's not even their best match together in Korakuen Hall.
No,
which is messed up to think about, because this is a match of the year contender level match in 2011, which I think is an all-time loaded year of professional wrestling. And this isn't even their best match in Korakuen Hall, but they returned a month after the fact. And, it was business as usual from that point. Awasa's back in the fold in Japan at that point. He obviously never comes over for Dragon Gate USA. But, it completely changed things. It's just, we don't know what that Compilation Gate show would have been. We don't know how it would have affected business, what angles would have occurred there. We know Shinjiro Otani was supposed to be the second for Masaki Mochizuki in that title match, but after the show was canceled, he couldn't make the Korakuen Hall date, so he worked the Shinjuku Face show instead. So just all sorts of minor ramifications, but we don't know what the major stuff could have been. But Mike, those are all of the notes I have. Sans one thing that happened on the night of Open the Southern Gate. Are you ready to hear about the CWF Mid-Atlantic card?
I'm just doing one last scan over everything just to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything, really. No, I don't really have too much there. I think Otani had something with Daichi Hashimoto that night, and that's why he didn't do that.
Yes, which we will talk about in a future episode. A lot of Daichi Hashimoto talk coming your way.
Yeah, no. One thing is that Shinjuku Face show, and I was trying to look up to see if I got the exact quote. I believe that was a benefit show that they ran.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So what? Please lay it on me, Case. I want to know about CWF Mid-Atlantic.
Yes, at one point the most prestigious independent wrestling promotion in the United States. But 2011 CWF Mid-Atlantic, this happened right before Open the Southern Gate in the same building. A show that featured the opening match of Nick Richards defeating Trevor Lee in the opening match. This is 3 years before Trevor Lee broke out at all. He is an unknown at this point. We also have a match between Lee Valiant and Chase Dakota, a CWF Mid-Atlantic Tag Team title match as Chiva Kid, who, Mike, do you know who Chiva Kid is?
I don't want to be accused of unmasking him, but he has specifically, like, similar build to one Andrew Everett.
Yes, someone that pops up on Dragon Gate USA shows a few years from now. Very similar build to Andrew Everett and his partner Kamikaze Kid. They fall to the VA bombers of Jason Blade and Adam Page. And then your main event match, Shane Helms defends the PWI International Heavyweight title against Rick Converse. I guess he wins the title, rather. So a 4-match show with Trevor Lee, Adam Page, Chiva Kid, and Shane Helms. God bless Southern Independent Professional Wrestling, Mike.
Rick Converse was kind of the dawn of the Carolinas at that time.
Someone I was unfamiliar with, but I'm sure he, looks like he worked Omega at CWF Mid-Atlantic,
right.
at PWX. He hits the high spots for me. Yeah. No, he's exactly what I'd hope he'd be.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I guess this is the part where I can talk about this. Like, I went to college in the next town over. I did not know CWF Mid-Atlantic existed until I think it was my senior year of college or my super senior year. Yeah, I did a victory lap. But I took time off, though.
Just one last stroll through campus, fist high in the air. Like, yeah, this is my place.
Do you want to get into a bit of Mike Spears lore for a second?
I would love to. You're a man of mystery. We've podcasted together for hours and hours and hours, and I still know very little about you.
I mean, I like being able to drop in nuggets of, like, little Spears facts here. So here's one. Give
me a hashtag Spears fact.
Hashtag Spears fact. So when I did my victory lap, I planned it in such a way that I only had classes on Tuesday and Thursday. Something that I highly encourage anyone to do if you can, because in the classes I took in my last semester were a intro to Buddhism. I took a web development learning Shockwave Flash, something that doesn't really matter nowadays. And then I took an online course for futurism, talking about like the idea of futurism and the singularity.
This is a fascinating schedule. It is actually a little similar to at least my schedule, where I only have classes Monday and Tuesday.
All right,
this upcoming semester, and all of my classes are online. Now, that is not school-wide, at least yet, but I scheduled classes in March, and even then I was like, you know what? I don't think we're going to have this under control by September. Let me schedule classes that could adapt to an online learning environment. And that is what I did. So course structure, they're different than yours, although Intro to Buddhism does sound very interesting. But yeah, no, 2 days of classes a week, I will take that. That sounds very nice. I'm looking forward to that on my end.
But yeah, no, it's the way to go. I also have a minor in religion, which I kind of lucked into. I was like, oh, I need to take one world religion and then one book about one class about the New Testament, and I got a minor. So I was like, okay, fine, whatever. I was done with all my major stuff. The thing about CWF, like, it was like in a place that I would have gone to CWF Mid-Atlantic shows if I knew they existed when I was in college. I did not know they existed until one night. I was at IHOP with friends, and walked in Ricky Morton. And I was just like, there was only like one of my friends there that was like a wrestling fan to my level. And so like everyone else was like, Mike, why are you craning your neck like that? And I was like, this isn't going to matter anything to you, but I need to go and text this person. And of course you go pull out, like, this was pre-iPhone, pull out your Nokia and you're like your text. I had like a slide out keyboard that time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I had a few slide out keyboard phones in my day. Okay. I'm not that young. I have done the 3 push to get the S. I know all about the slide out keyboard.
Yeah. So that was right there. And then I was like, why is Ricky Morton in town? So then I got back to my apartment after that, and I Googled Ricky Morton, Burlington, North Carolina, and it ended up that CWF Mid-Atlantic was there. And I looked at who all showed up there, and I decided, nah. And to this day, one of my smartest wrestling decisions I've ever made is never caring about CWF Mid-Atlantic.
Could have entered you into a vastly different internet community. I am glad you ended up here, Mike. I am glad you made it out alive.
I mean, I could be deeply in the Halesverse. What can I say?
And I like Dylan Hales. He had a great episode on my Art School Albums podcast. Good man. But Mike, are you ready to open the Southern Gate? Let's do it.
All right. So this was at the CWF Mid-Atlantic Sportatorium or Coliseum. They've changed it because they've changed venues so many times. Do you remember what they called it? It was the Mid-Atlantic Coliseum. Sportatorium.
On this specific show, it's the Sportatorium.
Right. All right. So they had basically 200 people there. We had no pre-show matches, as there are no bonus cards because every match is as important as the last. We start off the show with Ronin backstage without Rich Swann. They claim they left Rich Swann in Japan. They said they lost a bunch of matches and they retired Rich Swann, but they found someone else. And then someone came out wearing a Santo match. Okama was his name. And they say he was the new member of Ronin. He went back behind like a partition door, unmasked to be Rich Swann, and they were all very angry that Rich Swann came back with them.
What did I miss? Who did Rich Swann make mad? He gets buried against Brody Lee on the last show, and now Taylor and Gargano don't like him, and I don't understand it, because Rich Swann has been awesome when he's not wrestling Homicide. I feel like Rich Swann really upset someone, and I don't know why.
I mean, it'll be something to watch about who made people mad on this show, because I have some questions. Then the next match is Brody Lee coming out with Blood Warriors. He's mad folks aren't showing them proper respect and that no one can beat them down, no one's staying out plotting. And out comes John Davis to fight him. And that this is the WW, I think it was on FIP, so I won't see WWN. But this is the DGUSA debut of John Davis versus Brody Lee with Naruki Doi and Ricochet. Brody Lee pins John Davis with a sit-down powerbomb in 6 minutes and 1 second.
Fun little match. I am very, very curious to see how John Davis's run holds up in Dragon Gate USA, because there was a lot of stuff about it that I've seen that I did not like, that I thought was maybe a good idea that was poorly executed. And I also think John Davis, at least from memory, has some really good matches in Dragon Gate USA. Now the star rating here will likely do this match an injustice, because, you know, I gave it 2 3/4 stars, not because it's a bad match. It just didn't get a ton of time, but the interaction between he and Brody here, you almost think like, God, these guys have a much better match in them, because John Davis is coming off of being Adam Pearce's, you know, literal henchman in the Dark City Fight Club and Ring of Honor on the HDNet days, where if Pearce didn't like a dark match that was going on, he would send out Dark City and they would destroy them. John Davis is here. I thought he matched up well against Brody. Brody Lee is someone who, again, I continue to talk about it. I did not realize he could talk the way he did even in Dragon Gate USA. He is in a really valuable role as this American in Blood Warriors, because Ricochet, even though he's super over, Ricochet just can't talk. And there have been times where Brody Lee has taken the microphone in these promo segments and has led the angle to where it needs to go. And he's very much a ring general in terms of the angles that are being on display. It's a very interesting role that I had no idea that Lee was that apt for such situations at that point in his career, but it's great to see. And I thought this was a fine way to kick off the show. I have no issue with John Davis as of now.
I'm someone that, at least when I was watching to it, and it's something that always bothered me, was John Davis and DGUSA. I ended up like really liking him post DGUSA, and especially like the later Evolve stuff. I always kind of joined there, but DGUSA, at least for me at the time, I remember having like almost like, why is John Davis like involved in this? Like, it just did not make sense to me. But this was like, for like 6 minutes, they didn't get enough time to really have a full-on Hoss battle. But it just was like, you could see like John Davis at this time would get much better, I would say. Like, there was some stuff that like you could tell was stuff that was supposed to be like impressive, and you'd see later from John Davis, and it would be like awesome. Like, especially like in like 2015, 2016 Evolve. But here it just was not necessarily there. He did get a kick out of the truck stop, which was Brody's finish.
Yes, he did. It got a decent reaction too. I think people picked up on that.
Right, yeah. I went 2.5 stars on it. I thought this was a perfectly competent but short opener, and I felt like that this was something that I'm ready for, like in this period, to have my opinion of John Davis completely changed, because I was definitely one of the people at the time. I actually got into a Twitter spat a long time ago, and different Twitter accounts ago, with Gabe Sapolsky over John Davis. So this is something that I am kind of excited to see this, and he'll be someone that we'll be talking about through the remainder of DGUSA. So, and
yeah, that is very true. I guess I did not really think until just now that he stays. He is on the shows from here on out pretty much. He's not on the final 2 double shots, but I think every other show he's on. And I know there's one match coming up months from now that I know you and I have a differing opinion on it, and I hope that it holds up in my mind the way I think it does, and I hope I can change your mind on one particular John Davis match. But for a debut, to me, this was a success.
Yes, and I know which match we're referring to, and that's the match that I got into a Twitter spat with Gabe Sapolsky about. 7 years ago.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
So after this, Blood Warriors laid out John Davis. Brody wants the crowd to applaud for him and thank him, but the crowd was not having it. Like, this crowd it's an interesting crowd because Burlington, North Carolina, I probably should have this up front, it's basically equidistant between Greensboro, North Carolina, and Raleigh, Durham. So, like, it's like 30 minutes one way, 30 minutes the other. It's like not a bad location for trying to get people from both places there. I mean, the crowd was full. I think it was like 250 normally, and they got 200 in here. And the crowd, I thought, was pretty good throughout this entire show, which, you know, doing a Dragon System show in the middle of Mid-Atlantic territory is something.
Yes, that is a reoccurring thought I had watching this show was like, it seems like the crowd wants to like this show,
right?
But they're not entirely sure what it is. Because again, like, you look at the CWF card that we just read, like, even Andrew Everett, who was doing flying at the time, I'm sure, as Chiva Kid, and then Adam Page and Trevor Lee, who was nothing at this point, not the Trevor Lee we came to know on the national independent scene. Like, you have to remember that show was headlined by Shane Helms and a guy named Rick Converse. Like, it was Southern independent professional wrestling. And as the show goes on and Pac begins to do his moves, like, it just took the crowd a little bit to warm up. And I think there's a few matches on the show, one in particular where it's like, man, if that match happened in front of a hot Philly crowd or a hot Chicago crowd, that would really be something. And I think there are times in this show where the crowd drags the matches down a little bit.
Okay.
Because this style needs a hot audience, just like the Dragon Gate USA house style, which is different than the current Dragon Gate house style, which Mike and I have been talking about when we've been doing our weekly updates. But like, I think this show was a good show that could have been a great show had there been a really receptive audience. I don't think anything on the show, with the exception of one segment, which I enjoyed how much the crowd shat on it, but like, nothing was really rejected on this show. I just don't think things were maybe praised as much as they should have been.
You see, and we'll get into this more, I have a greatly divergent opinion on this show.
Okay,
so
I look forward to hearing it.
Yeah, so the next segment was Air Fox having a backstage promo. He said he debuted on the last pay-per-view, but on this show he was going to break out. And that led us to our first Breakout Challenge match, Kyle Matthews versus Lindsay Dorado versus Sugar Dunkerton versus Jimmy Rave. So Lindsay Dorado, there must have been something that moved around because originally that was supposed to be John Davis in that spot, and he got moved up to the opener, the singles match. So Lindsay Dorado was on the show. I think this is like right before, like him and Mike Quackenbush had a big falling out, I want to say. So
that sounds right. Yeah. And Lindsay is the guy who jumped out at me in this match. Is, you know, he was on the bonus cards of the first few shows. He's in the big cluster on the Open the Freedom Gate show and the Generation Now match. I thought he had improved drastically since then. I thought Lindsay Dorado was the star of this match.
Yeah, I absolutely thought he was the star of this match. Sadly, he would not advance as 2016 Wrestler of the Year. Jimmy Rave defeated Sugar Dunkerton with a Shining Wizard in 5 minutes and 2 seconds. It was this is the part about the show where I think we're gonna that like I major issues probably more so than you. This Breakout Challenge, you take this away from this card, and you have what would become like what a solid Dragon Gate USA show was looking at this point, in my opinion.
Yes.
But you had all this. You had someone that we're going to talk about in this post-match here. And then you had like all of this here that just like the non-Dragon Gate related stuff here that dragged it down such a bit that this is one of my least favorite DGUSA shows because of how badly the stuff dragged it down. Just because.
Yeah, I think that's entirely fair. This, my issue with the Breakout Challenge was it's not even that the stuff wasn't great. It's that I don't want to pay the money to the Dragon Gate USA brand to see Jimmy Rave. And I like Jimmy Rave, mind you, but the finals of the Breakout Challenge, that is not a match that belongs on a Dragon Gate USA show. If it happens on a Evolve card, fine, but that is not a Dragon Gate USA match. I felt Sugar Dunkerton was just not up to par of the normal worker. Kyle Matthews, kind of the same deal.
Yeah.
Like, when you're on a show with Brody Lee and Rich Swann and Pac and Akira Tozawa, it becomes really, really clear that you cannot hang with those guys if you are on the level of a Sugar Dunkerton or a Kyle Matthews. Again, the one guy that really surprised me in this match was Lindsay Dorado, who I think should have advanced. I understand Rave's the hometown guy. You want to give him the spot. Obviously, Gabe had a prior relationship with him through their Ring of Honor days. But this was it. I've never said this before. This match made me want to see more Lindsay Dorado.
Yeah, no, Lindsay was someone that I got to see pretty much from the jump, and he was someone that got a lot of kind of crap during his Chikara event because of how quickly he was pushed. It was very similar to like a Dragon Dia thing in a lot of ways, but in 2011, I mean, like, he was really coming together, and I mean, he'd later become a WWE superstar. He would later do the Cruiserweight Challenge and kind of prove people wrong. So seeing him here was like a pleasant thing here versus going like, oh God, Lindsay Dorado's here, which was something that people really had in like 2007 through 2009. So I'm with you there. So post-match, Johnny Fairplay comes out in a insane get-up. He is called Sammy Hager by the crowd. He's here to sign a Breakout star. Spoiler, Jimmy Rave is his favorite.
He said Jimmy Rave is my fave,
Sorry.
which I really liked.
Jimmy Rave is his fave. Spoiler alert first. So Johnny Fairplay of TNA and more so of Survivor fame was on this show.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, because I specifically did not Google it, but I did not know who Johnny Fairplay was, and I was very confused as to why in the Newswire and on commentary, people seemed really pumped about Johnny Fairplay being here. It was just another man in a suit that I very much liked, but just another dude on the card to me.
So Johnny Fairplay was known for his time on Survivor, where he outright lied that his grandmother was dying, and they threw a challenge for him to do this. And he kind of spun this out into like the celeb reality was a big thing at this time. Case. Here's the thing you need to learn about the post-recession years of 2008 through 2011. If, as John Boyce quite astutely put, in the 1990s, everyone went insane. We were still insane at this point. So he was a big figure. I remember like he got like 6-figure deals from Impact, like coming out of this.
That sounds right.
So like, yeah, no, he was a figure, and I mean, it just was another thing, not on my DGUSA shows.
No, why? Again, like, this segment wasn't even offensively bad. It's just not what I want to see on this show. On, again, a show with Pac and Ricochet and Naruki Doi, I don't want Johnny Fairplay in that mix as well.
Yep, no, and we would have more of him a little bit later. We had an obnoxious music video. Since this is on iPay Review, and this was the first show, I believe, on WWN Live. We'll talk more about it as we get into WrestleMania weekend. They were trying to show off Freedom Fight, which was, I believe, one of their first iPay reviews. I don't think was even available on WWN Live. So I think they were trying to like promote like the DVD sale there, and with like just like it was like 2-minute video in the middle of an iPay review to do this.
It was a really long promo video, which it didn't have to be. If it was a minute long, it would have been fine. But like you said, it was like 2.5 minutes long for a show that wasn't that good.
I mean, this is not like the China video for WWN Live, but this is kind of the first thing that they had.
Nothing is like the China video, my friend. Nothing is on that level.
After that very awkward music video that would be a precursor of things to come, we had a singles match, the first part of the Stable Shootout, as Sami Callihan defeated Rich Swann in 9 minutes and 44 seconds with the stretch muffler. And we talked about like Rich Swann kind of being a little bit like, you could tell like that people were like frustrated or something. This match felt like almost like an outright burial of Rich Swann.
I don't know if it felt like a burial of Rich Swann as much as it is clear throughout the entire Triple Shot, the booking of this weekend, that Gabe is all in on Sami Callihan at this point. I think Callihan looked really good in this match. I don't know. I really liked this match.
Oh no, I did too.
It starts off really hot. I think it falls apart a little bit for no particular reason. I just think they lost steam as they headed towards the closing stretch. But this is the kind of stuff, again, it's not an it's going to say anti-American. It's not that I don't want Americans on these Dragon Gate USA shows. They just need to be on the level of a Rich Swann or a Sami Callihan, because right now Callahan's brought it in all of his appearances. And I've said, Swann has been really, really good outside of the Homicide match, which was not his fault. I thought this was great. And I should note real quick, I don't think they came out to this song on the Northeast Triple Shot. No. I think this is the first time that Ronin uses the Don't Die Digging by the Graduate entrance theme, which is the Out of Control. That song kicks ass, and I completely had forgotten that is a part of Dragon Gate USA, and I am now excited to hear that song on the rest of the Dragon Gate USA shows. What a marvelous entrance theme for Ronin.
Yeah, they were kind of weird about entrance theme. I don't know if people all brought the MP3s or the CDs for the in-house, at least in Burlington, because you had Brody Lee come out to I Like Cola. You have this, which is more known as Johnny Gargano's theme, and at this time, I thought that Johnny Gargano was still using metric gold girls and guns. Like, that was kind of his big thing, which is another kind of crazy thing. Like, Johnny Gargano, for all he has some interesting tastes to, like, independent music that I think it's a different bent on it that I like. So... yeah,
he's an interesting guy. I would call him a dork, but I'll say he's an interesting guy.
Oh no, he's a dork, absolute dork. He's a Funko dork.
Yes, he is.
Yes. So like the reason why I thought this was like a squash was basically Sammy took about 75% of this match. There was a really sick ramp spot, and then a long beatdown section where he was lighting Rich Swann up with chops and punches. And then we had like a really kind of fun, like little bit of a shine for Rich Swann before Sammy just completely took him down and took him out with the stretch muffler. Like, it was for like a 10-minute match, it was a pretty simple 10-minute match, and it was effective with that. It just, like, with how things went and like how things are, it made me wonder with like the intro promo and like with Rich Swann, like losing very definitively in this match, made me wonder if like he is getting buried here. But I went 3 1/4 on this match.
I went 3.5.
Okay.
I really liked it.
Yeah, I thought this was a real solid one. And, for like this show has a lot of matches. And luckily, the matches that should have time got time. Some of the matches that didn't need time needed to lose more time because they felt like they took forever, which we will get into in a second. We do go backstage case to Jon Moxley. He's all alone in Burlington, North Carolina, but that's okay. He's wearing a sweet Baja hoodie. And he wants to take out all of Blood Warriors. He'll do it one-on-one. And then he cut, like, the Rebby Sky promo and the Rebby Sky angle by the end of this show and by the end of this weekend. It's just one of those things that this is something that they did in 2011. And it's something that in 2011 I was kind of like, okay, he's really going hard on this kind of thing. And in 2020, it's just uncomfortable and not necessary in my mind.
We'll talk about the Rebby Sky thing later because it's whatever. I cannot believe the way Kamikaze USA imploded, and they did nothing.
Nothing at all.
Nothing with it. They are broken up at a post-show promo that is filmed backstage. Yamato's not on the show. Mox says he's healing up for his title match tomorrow, which is fine with me. But this is Mox's last weekend in the company, which we'll talk about in a few weeks. It's his last weekend in the company, and you are clearly trying to make Akira Tozawa a thing. How is this what you do? How is Mox just all alone when, as we talked about a year ago, they're in Canada, and we can't go one match without a Kamikaze USA interference? Like, they were dominating these shows the entirety of 2010, and then 2011 rolls around, and I understand that Blood Warriors form, and I understand that Blood Warriors versus Ronin is, and quite honestly should be, the focus of the promotion. But how do you not do more with the end of Kamikaze USA? Because it is known going into this weekend that Mox is leaving the territory. How is this what they come up with? I cannot believe they squandered so many opportunities with Jon Moxley on his last weekend.
And, like, to play a little bit of Gabe Advocate here, I'm just going to play Gabe Advocate here. Shingo only returned to Dragon Gate 2 weeks before this, after he had his shoulder injury. So Shingo was not going to be in the cards for these shows whatsoever. So you had Shingo out of the equation. Neither Yoshino or Yamato were on this show. They were already in Atlanta, as was Stalker Ichikawa. Stalker Ichikawa doesn't need to concern himself with Burlington, North Carolina, to be fair.
No, he does not.
So, like, you're left with Moxley and Tozawa. We had the big turn to end the United weekend, and you don't do anything with that here, where you really could use that there to provide, like, a storyline about how Kamikaze USA is imploding. Like, that's the thing that gets me, is, yes, your hand dealt with. You don't have Shingo there. He was the leader of Kamikaze in Japan. I mean, he is with the exception of Shima, and maybe Akira Tozawa at this point, the most well-known person to your audience as a Dragon Gate native. Yamato is taking the night off. He's already in Atlanta. They would run a seminar the next day led by, I think it was Yoshino and Pac, but Yamato was there as well. So you have, like, these two people here, which should be the focus of the Kamikaze dissolution, right? Like, it should be about Moxley and Tozawa, and it does get more into it as the weekend goes along, you couldn't do one thing here to play up that. And that's the frustrating thing to me about Jon Moxley on his last weekend, is you had this match that unless you were watching the end of a pay-per-view that was on the air 2 weeks before this, you read the report and that was it.
Again, they didn't even break them up in front of an audience. And this is a show. Now, I hate to complain about the main event because the main event was great. I don't really want to change that. But if you're going to build a show around the Stable Shootout and you need a true main event, do Moxley versus Tozawa on this show. Have Tozawa win going into his Bravegate match the next night. And then, do whatever with Mox after this. It is just such a squandered opportunity to do nothing, to just not really even have an angle outside of Mox kicking him in the gut and saying you're out, and that is it. I was unaware or had blocked this out of my memory that this is how Kamikaze USA ends. This is just such a massive missed opportunity.
And it's something where you look at this and you look at Jon Moxley became, with the exception of maybe Ricochet wasn't around for all these things. Jon Moxley became the American Western face of Dragon Gate USA.
He's the guy. It's him. He's the top American star in this promotion. I don't think there's a close number two, and I think the number two is either Brody or Ricochet, but Mox has a lap on them.
And he's been a focal point pretty much since that second Chicago show.
Yes. The first Philly show where he debuts, he gets a giant angle. Now, granted, the angle is bad because it's him and Brian Kendrick, but he gets a giant angle on his debut show.
So, third show in the company, and now we're in the 17th show. So, we're in 2 weeks, we'll have ended the Jon Moxley era of Dragon Gate USA. And this is how they chose to have him go out. So, this was not the Carlson I had put in my head, but this is definitely something to be noted, that this is such a lost opportunity here to make it feel more impactful, especially in comparison to how there would be farewells in the future.
I will give it I'll let it play out because there's 2 more shows this weekend. Right. Maybe there's stuff I'm forgetting. We'll let it play out. But as of right now, I think it is a horrible, horrible missed opportunity.
Absolutely. And something else that was horrible, Breakout Challenge Part 2. Eric Cannon versus AR Fox versus Facade versus Shima Zion. Eric Cannon won with a brainbuster on Facade in 9 minutes, or 8 minutes, 52 seconds. In case, this is my worst match in DGUSA history. 1 1/4 star.
No. It is not that bad.
Oh, I think it's terrible.
It is not that bad. No. Now, here's the thing. It's not worse than the 2 Homicide matches. It's just not, because yes, you have Facade, which we'll get to. But Shima Zion, AR Fox, and Eric Cannon, they pulled their weight, okay? They did all right. This was not a great match by any means, but this was not a bad match, okay? It's hard to have a bad match when you have AR Fox, who obviously becomes one of the key players in Dragon Gate USA. You have Eric Cannon, who his big push starts this weekend, and Shima Zion's a guy who we'll talk about a little bit about a month from now as we get into the next Triple Shot in the spring and early summer in May, or I think it's early June. He's a guy that doesn't come back to Dragon Gate USA because he gets a really big opportunity. But if he doesn't get that place in TNA, I think he becomes a guy, at least on the undercards of Dragon Gate USA, because I think he was talented enough even in 2011 to hang around. The issue in this match is, Mike, did you catch Facade's nickname as he was coming to the ring?
Oh, he's a suburban terrorist.
The suburban terrorist. Mike, what are we doing with our lives? Why is this our hobby, that we are breaking down the suburban terrorist?
Well, I'm going to push back first on Shima Zion. I felt like that he later became a great wrestler, but at this time, not ready for prime time. It looked like he was going at a quarter speed with people like AR Fox, whose speed shouldn't be an equation. I do think that opportunity that he gets, that we'll talk about a little bit later, was the best thing that happened to his career. I think he's one of the few people that's actually incredibly benefited from being there. But I felt like that Shima Zion was underwhelming at best in this. But Facade is, I think maybe like Homicide, you at least have a reason to book Homicide. Facade, I don't believe he was living in the Carolinas. I feel like I'd be able to see someone with platinum blonde dreadlocks around, being a suburban terrorist and terrorizing people in the night, which, hey, Larry Legend, you put emphasis on that call, but you didn't want to pull Facade over and say, you sound like a total dipshit in this intro. And he comes out, he spray paints a piece of paper he hands to a fan, and
which is the worst gimmick. It is the worst
garbage
thing I've ever seen.
And he's awful. The worst wrestler in DGUSA.
The radical graffitiist. It is terrible. You say he's the worst worker in Dragon Gate USA.
At this time, I think that Homicide, there's at least a reason why you book Homicide in the Northeast. Facade brings something to the table. He ruins this match. I think Shima Zion didn't do much help either, and I felt bad for Air Fox and Cannon in this thing. It was slow. For an 8-minute match, this felt like it was 20 minutes. There was like a weird moonsault that someone missed that went straight into an armbar for whatever reason. It was Shima Zion missed a moonsault, but he acted like he hit it and went to an armbar. And I just hated my life, Case. I hated my life watching this match. Defend this match, please. Push back.
No, because it's not a great match. It's 2 3/4, okay? It's not
2 3/4?
Yes, it's not one that I want to go back and watch. I thought AR Fox and Eric Cannon, in particular, make this match all right. And again, I like Shima Zion a little bit more than you. I think he's someone that would have improved if he got more time in Dragon Gate USA.
That's
again,
fair. That's
the
fair.
issue with this match is Facade. And thank God, he did not win this match. It was Eric Cannon, not AR Fox, which surprised me. I assumed Fox was going to win this. It's Eric Cannon who comes away with the victory.
Do you know that other nicknames that he's had for Facade are the Neon Ninja, the Bomber, and the Aerosol Assassin?
Neon Ninja's not terrible. I don't hate that.
All right, his signature moves as listed on Cage Match, the Arashikage Driver, Hyper Crush on capitals, and the Dreadlock.
You know what? Dreadlock is good.
I mean, like,
I don't hate that.
This is a guy who I just like watch this and I'm like, he had to be, if he was like the best person from the tryouts, why didn't you pull on Andrew Everett, put him back under the hood and put him in this match?
I hope this doesn't sound like mean-spirited, but Facade has cage matches going back to 2006.
Right, yeah.
And the only match he has in his match guide is a match from July 4th, 2020 on the Game Changer Backyard Show.
I watched that show. There's fire.
Again, I'm sure he's a nice guy. The spray painting is dumb. Stop doing that. But I'm sure he's a nice guy. But I have never seen Facade have a good match.
No. He's never had a good match. And this sucked.
It did. It was not great. Again, not great.
So after this match, Jimmy Rave said in a very short promo that he'd see Jimmy Rave would see Eric Cannon later. And then we had the second match of the Stable Shootout as John Moxley faced off against Naruki Doi. And Naruki Doi won with a Bakatari sliding kick in 10 minutes 53 seconds. In case, this might be one of my favorite John Moxley matches in DGUSA.
Really, really fun finishing stretch in this match. It's the second singles match Mox has against a Dragon Gate proper guy. He wrestled BB Hulk in Philly a few shows ago. Now he's got Doi. It was a good match, and then the finishing stretch where Mox hits the Doi fives and then proceeds to slap the shit out of Doi. Doi comes right back. It's a Doi 5 of his own and then slaps Moxley. Moxley kind of gives in to the slaps, gives him the finger, and then gets his head cleaned off with a Bakatari sliding kick for the win. It's a really good match, and the last 2 minutes are great. It is fun to watch Mox in this environment because the impression I've always got is that he didn't care for the Dragon Gate style, and there wasn't enough selling. It was too fast for him. And it makes sense given the fact that he never really worked against Dragon Gate proper talent. But I thought he meshed really well against BB Hulk and Philly, and I thought he looked great against Naruki Doi here.
Yeah, I would have to say that Naruki Doi deciding to do a figure 4 in the Mid-Atlantic country and kind of wrestling like a traditional like territories main eventer coming to local talent match. Because at this point, Naruki Doi is full on heel, and he's just acting like how one would assume a territory champ or like a world champion would be coming to your town, facing off against your up-and-comer. And that was kind of the match we had here, and I thought it ruled. Like, this is a match that I felt like the crowd finally started getting into the show in a lot of ways during this match. And the final stretch was something really special. Like, there was about a good solid 30 seconds of them just slapping the crap out of each other with the heaviest hands in wrestling. Naruki Doi just peppering John Moxley, and then Moxley going like, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to do this for a bit. And I have to say, I think Moxley was great in this, but I think a lot of this was Naruki Doi deciding to play to John Moxley's strengths. I went 3 3/4 on this match. I loved it.
I was at 3.5, but I can't knock you at all for the 3 3/4. Doi doing the figure 4, it has to be calculated. Nobody on this roster loves American wrestling more than Naruki Doi, so that makes sense. And again, I would have liked Mox to at least stick around to the end of 2011, because I really think there was a lot more stuff for him to do in this promotion, because again, his time is spent wrestling Brian Kendrick and Paul London and Tommy Dreamer and Jimmy Jacobs and Homicide, and there's an entire half of the roster that he never touches. I mean, we never get Moxley versus Gargano, Moxley versus Swan. There's never, Moxley versus Mochizuki. Like, he is a guy that leaves, and it feels like there's so much more left on the table, which is maybe what is so frustrating about the Kamikaze thing, is that it doesn't even feel like he goes out with a bang, at least up to this point, when there was just so much more that he could have done. And I obviously don't begrudge the guy for signing a contract and then having the next decade of his career play out the way it did. He made the right decision. But specifically in the Dragon Gate USA universe, it just seems like there could have been more here. And from the Hulk match and from the Doi match, I think it's clear that if he wanted to, he could have worked very successfully against the Dragon Gate talent, at least in America. I don't know if that would have translated to Japan or not, but in America, he could have had a few really big matches.
Yeah, and the match that was left on the table that could have happened that really frustrates me, like, it made sense why it didn't happen when the guy was over here, but him versus Masaki Mochizuki would have been incredibly interesting.
Oh, it would have been fascinating.
It would have been absolutely fascinating. And this is a match, like, on a show where, like, basically, at least in my opinion, it's a pick and choose show that I did not, other than, like, a couple matches I really enjoyed. This is worth watching just because it's a different style of match than you expect in DGUSA.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
All right. And then next, we had a backstage promo with Eric Cannon. He says he's not broken through anything. He's going to break Jimmy Ray's face. And that led us to another promo of WWN Live. It's now here. WWN Live is a thing. And then we have Rebby Sky. Rebby Sky is here again. She thanks everyone for coming out, kind of just being like she's the person because there was no real go-home promo that she was thanking everyone for coming out. John Moxley comes out and says that she's stalking him and that she wants to date him, but then he says a lot of really gross stuff. And then a girl comes out who was with him in the previous thing, and they have a fight. We had a lot of cat fight references being made, both by John Moxley over the microphone and by commentary, and this was another thing not in my Dragon Gate that I want to see. It was just bad.
No, the Rebby Sky, like, her crowd work got the softest, most awkward applause. It was very polite. Like, they were like, I guess we have to play along right now, even though we don't want to. And then the Mox stuff, like, I don't think these promos in particular were overtly offensive or blatantly awful, but it's also just not what I'm ever looking for in my wrestling. Like, it's just an aspect of storytelling that I just don't care about. Like, and it's stuff that, wouldn't air in 2020, shouldn't air in 2020. It aired in 2011. Like, on this show, it's like the Rebby Sky thing, I have to know why was she getting booked? I just don't understand to bring her down south. I get it if it's the Northeast, and I get it in the sense that logistically she lives in the Northeast, so fine, bring her on board, even though she did nothing on that triple shot. But to bring her out again, I'm missing it. Like, I don't understand it.
Well, there'll be a reason why that we get to in the next 2 weeks' case.
I look forward to it.
So that was a segment.
That's exactly it. That was a rough segment.
That was a segment, and then we had Shima versus Giant Gargano. This is a rematch of their match. They had almost a year to this point. This was one of the Stable Shootout matches, and Shima put away Giant Gargano in 20 minutes and 11 seconds with the Meteora. And this was probably my second favorite match of the night. I feel like that this was very interesting in how differently it was worked. You know, it was worked very differently from like their first match, which was very much inversion on Shima like eating people's lunch that he didn't respect. And it really turned into like a really like big closing stretch. Shima took a really gross looking lawn dart and super kick near fall that I bought into. And they were really like, they liked slapping people on this show. And these two were definitely keying into it. What were your thoughts on this?
It's fun to compare this to the 1-year anniversary match where Gargano was the heel and he's really cocky and he's not quite on Shima's level, but he thinks he is. And then here, even though Shima wins the match, Shima's working heel, Gargano's the face, and it feels like it's pretty close to a level playing field. And unfortunately, this is the last singles match these two have against one another. They had one more scheduled at the start of 2014, but that never ends up happening because Shima is injured. So this is it for the Shima Gargano matches, and it really feels like there's one or two more left in the tank, just given the way the rest of this promotion plays out. I'm really disappointed we don't get another one of these matches because, yeah, I think they played to the strengths of the venue where, again, some of the flying didn't totally get over. Some of the flying was sloppy, and I think that just hurts the overall effect that it has. So Gargano and Shima just kind of kicked the shit out of each other. And it was really, really fun to watch. And Gargano kept on surviving and surviving. He kicked out of the perfect driver. And then the finishing stretch of this match, Shima hits the Schwein, and right before he goes up for the Meteora, he just punches Gargano in the back of the neck. And it is such a small thing, but that is why Shima is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. In that moment, he had been working heel the entire match. But if you had any confusion or reservations about Shima turning heel and about Blood Warriors dominating this promotion, watching him hit Gargano with his finisher and then punch him so hard in the back of the neck, it was like, oh my God, this is character building. Like, I know exactly who this guy is now. And then he flattens Gargano with the Meteora, gets the win. I went 3 3/4.
I went 4.
Yeah, I do not begrudge you for that at all.
This is something that, and it's not thing you can blame the promotion for because you can't blame people for getting injured. But you really had like this nice storytell that would have been perfect when you would have the ace Johnny Gargano going against Shima right after his monster reign, right after all the stuff like Shima's going to be the big figure in both DGUSA and DG for like the next, until basically when he got pulled from that card. And I don't think he appeared again in Dragon Gate USA before that show. After that show, so like
no, he did not.
That is something that's left on the table that sadly never would come to pass, to no fault of anyone's there. But this is such a special thing, and something that I noticed earlier, that I have to imagine that these guys were none too pleased, especially Shima. There was 2 different instances of the, and I don't really like this spot, but it's something that worked here and it did not work earlier. I think it was like Kyle Matthews did this spot, maybe with Lindsay Dorado or with Sugar Duncan, where they do a super kick that knocks both of them out at the same time.
Yeah, there were 2 of those on this show. I noticed that as well.
Okay, cool. And then it happened here like right after like this huge, like 15 minutes in the match. These 2 guys are tired. They've been at each other's throats now for a quarter of an hour. And then like they're going last gasp doing this, and then they do the knockout kick there that worked perfectly here. And it went right into the closing stretch that I gotta wonder if like backstage, like going over the monitor when this happened, like I can see Shima like shake his head and be like, not so good. And then like this, because I feel like that was like a crucial moment in this match that was kind of hurt by the fact that you had it happen in a nothing 4-way earlier.
Mike, I completely agree. That's something I glossed over in my notes that I should have brought up, but you're right. Because I think the double super kick in the 4-way looks pretty bad. I think they nailed it here. Because I think about the modern wrestling landscape, and again, we haven't seen Shima work a match since April 1st, and we're recording this in mid-July. And I think you just kind of forget how good this guy is. And this Gargano match is just another one where it's like, holy shit, he's got this in his catalog, and this is not in the upper echelon of Shima matches. This isn't probably one of his 100 best singles matches, and he's got this out there. He is just a master of the craft.
Yeah. And then we had another awkward music video. This time it was for United NYC, which I guess they really were getting over the whole entire thing from going to WN Live. But it was like another 2-minute video. It would be one of the things to to really come from the future. But after this, we had the Breakout Challenge Final, where Eric Cannon defeated Jimmy Rave with the Glimmering Warlock in 9 minutes. In case, yeah, this match happened.
Not a match I want on my Dragon Gate USA shows. It's fine. I give it 2.5.
Yeah,
Average professional wrestling match.
2.5.
Not bad. Not bad. 2 pros in there. Eric Cannon, has some talent. Jimmy Rave, depending on his health, has talent. Not what I want to see. And just a match that, you said what 9 minutes. I mean, it felt so much longer than that. And again, it wasn't even bad. It's just think about the match that came before this and the match that comes after this. Why is this on the show?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing about this and why I'm so down on this Southern Gate show is you look at the DGUSA stuff and they get like pretty much the proper time you'd expect. I would maybe like to see another 4 minutes of Moxley and Doi. But then you have the previous 4-way, the one that Kanan won, that felt like it was 9 minutes going on 30. This match, at this point, like on the show, I was like, because I remember how much I enjoyed the main event. I was like, okay, it's going to get better. But like I kept like checking the playtime. I was like, is this match not over? We still have a big main event coming after this, and it just was not there. And it was not that fine. Do you have any other big thoughts about Eric Cannon being our Breakout Challenge star?
Surprised it's not AR Fox, but given what's coming next, it doesn't entirely surprise me.
Yep. And then Johnny Fairplay came out. Johnny Fairplay said he would not sign Eric Cannon. Eric Cannon was fine at this. And kudos to Johnny Fairplay. He took a really awesome Total Anarchy.
Yeah, okay. So I was annoyed with the Johnny Fairplay thing because I didn't know who it was. I didn't care until Mike explained it to me. Then I knew exactly who it was. He takes the Total Anarchy, which is an insane move to take for anyone. But for him to do it, he took a pretty good bump on it. It was like, all right, you know what? I wouldn't book him. But if you're going to book Johnny Fairplay, he better be taking a bump on his head because he can do a pretty good job of that.
Right, yeah. And, I mean, he's someone that trained to be a wrestler. He was someone that was trained under Roddy Piper, of all people.
I did not know that.
Yeah, like, the thing was that for a while people thought that he was kind of just, like, his bag boy, for lack of better words. Like, he was just, like, the guy that he trained that brought around and basically, used him as, like, a servant. So it was, like, one of those things, like, but, yeah, no, he definitely was someone that was trained to be a pro wrestler, and he did that for a while before and then a lot more after. I mean, he did not... So this was all after the TNA stuff. And then he would have like a couple more things. He would be on a promotion I've never heard of called WFX, where he swindled Eugene Densmore, out of pocket money in a trick reminiscent of his Survivor lie. So he was
that sounds really bad. That I do not want to watch that.
Yeah. And his wife at this time was on Tough Enough.
Oh, good for her.
And he lived in North Carolina. So that's probably why he was on these shows as well. But let's get to the main event. This was a Dream Tag Team Partners match. And what Dream Partners we would have as Pac would team with Ricochet. And Akira Tozawa would team with Chuck Taylor. Pac won in 20 minutes and 44 seconds with the British Airways on Chuck Taylor. And Case, I'm going to let you take it first. This is an incredible match.
So obviously it's the only time Chuck Taylor and Akira Tozawa team together because there's no other circumstance for them teaming together. I would like to see it, but it just wouldn't make sense. Ricochet and Pac, years later, they are in the same unit in World One International, but Pac's time in World One International, I believe they form in March of 2012, and then Pac spends all of May and part of June doing Best of the Super Juniors,
right,
and then leaves the promotion in July. So it's not like he has a lot of time in that unit. So this is also the only time that Ricochet and Pac team together in a 2-on-2 match. There are some 6-mans where they're on the same team, but this is their only straight 2 versus 2 tag match, which is a shame because it's, I've talked, especially in the Philly episode, about how good Pac is in the ring, but to see he and Ricochet do this annoyed partners deal and to do it so well in a way that didn't feel campy, didn't feel like something TNA would do where all of the tag team partners hated each other, where they had a rightful grudge and integrated it into a match that they still wanted to win. It was marvelous to see. And there's one particular section in this match where Ricochet and Chuck Taylor are in the ring. And Chuck Taylor helped train Ricochet. They've wrestled each other a million times. And they do a sequence that is probably closer to lucha than it actually is the Dragon Gate style. They do like a lucha sequence in the ring where everything is so quick and so tight and it's unreal. And Taylor gets sent to the outside and Ricochet goes to hit the ropes to do a dive, but Pac shoves him out of the way and then does a dive of his own. And that 60-second sequence right there is world-class, elite-level professional wrestling. And quite honestly, this match, that spot, but this match in particular, or I'm sorry, this match, but that spot in particular, it made me wonder why Chuck Taylor is the one that kind of got the short end of the stick with the Ronin guys in Japan. Because to me, Chuck Taylor is the one. Rich Swann makes sense. He does the standing 450. He's got the rapid entrance. I guess Johnny Gargano because he was a champion, but I'm just very surprised that Chuck Taylor never went over to Dragon Gate again after his March tour, because I feel like he is on the level of a Tozawa, Ricochet, or Pac in this match.
Yeah, and Chuck's talked about it since then. He's firmly of the belief that Shima hates him.
Yes, that is on record, I think, by multiple sources at this point.
Yeah. Shima, no big sexy Chucky T fan, but I'm glad you talked about Ricochet and Pac and like how well they played this, because the team I wanted to talk about, Akira Tozawa and Chuck Taylor, are like this galaxy brain, like perfect tag team in a lot of ways. Like the only time that, of course, they ever teamed, but they work so well together that you want to see like, hey, Tozawa's really down for Ronin thing. Like I remember coming out of this match thinking, because at the time I didn't know that Tozawa was heading back to Japan so soon, I was like, could he be a member of Ronin? Like, wouldn't that be like an interesting inversion that all these Americans want to join the Japanese stables, but then a Japanese wrestler from the home promotion joins one of the American stables? It's like, that would have been awesome. Like, Tozawa teaming with Rich Swann and teaming with Johnny Gargano would have been something, and teaming with Chuck Taylor would have been something I would have loved to see. And I thought that these two had like a really cool chemistry in this match. And something that's like with this that's also really great, like there was like this strike exchange with Pac and Tozawa in this, because the next night they would have a Brave Gate match. And this was like something that like they did this, and like after like the first strike, Tozawa is on wobbly legs. He's in wobbly legs in a way that like makes perfect sense and not comical whatsoever. It was like, oh, he looks like he just got rocked for a bit, but he's trying to stay in the fight. I thought that was exceptional. There was like something that I thought was really interesting, because you have Pac and Ricochet teaming up. They're in the middle of this year-long feud over who is the best high flyer, who is the Brave Gate champion here, and how that played off there. And you have Tozawa added into this, the fact that Tozawa is the next person getting a Brave Gate shot, and it kind of like all went together. Tozawa did a taupe that was a classic Davey, going right out of frame into this, and this is just like a really fun match with an awesome dynamic that is one of those matches that's the first time and only time, if Gabe put that title to this match, that would have fit it very well, and I loved it. Pac did get busted open on a headbutt that looked really ugly, and Chuck Taylor like looked over and you see his eyes bulge out a little bit going, that's bad. And I thought that was kind of remarkable in this too.
And it's the only time I've ever seen Pac get busted open, and it was like an accidental blood thing that I thought looked really nice.
Yeah, it was really remarkable because it was like a headbutt on the outside, and they're doing this. They do actually picture in a way that I think was really smart. Like
I agree. It was the only time I've ever seen them do that, where they did picture in picture with the brawling on the floor and the action in the ring. I thought it looked really good.
Yeah, and the crowd got up for this, but I imagine what this crowd would have been the next night if they did this show in Atlanta. Like I went 4 stars on this, but this is a match that in a different venue and given more time and different circumstances, I could have easily gone much higher for this. I absolutely loved it.
Maybe it's just because I'm so high on the historical ramifications of the Ricochet and Pac feud, and this is just another chapter. And again, I thought their interplay was brilliant, really, because I hate the WWE, the TNA, the partners that hate each other, the bickering partners, the odd couple thing. Ricochet and Pac did it in a way that I thought was really realistic And then again, Taylor in particular, I really think he brought the heat in this match. And Tozawa somehow is the fourth guy. And we just talked about a triple shot where he wrestles Sammy and he wrestles Aries and he wrestles Hulk in 3 really, really good to great matches. And Tozawa somehow the fourth guy here. Mike, I gave this match 4.5 stars. I loved this match.
Oh no, I totally get that. Like, that's not something where I feel like that we're off and we're like, no. Like the 4-way match where I think it's the worst match in history and you were a lot more charitable to it.
It does not even touch Moxley versus Homicide, but continue. Sorry to cut you off.
I mean, I think this is something that until something else happens that's worse, we're going to be divergent on that, and that's fine. But this is a match that, like, I'm just imagining what would happen if this match was in Philly or this match was in Chicago. Because then I'd be like, 4.5, is this thing 4 3/4? Like, these guys could have probably had like a 60-minute time limit draw here, and it would have been fascinating. I felt like that'd be really great to see this.
There were 2 Pac matches in particular that I think he is a victim of being in the wrong building at the wrong time, because there's this match, which again, I give it 4.5, but imagine if it was in that Philly market or that hot Chicago crowd, or even BB King's, I think would have reacted really positively to this.
Sure.
He's also got that PWG 6-man in 2012. It's him, Generico, and Yoshino against Steen, Super Dragon, and Tozawa. And that match happens, we'll talk about it because it happens at the Wrestle Reunion weekend with Giant USA Open the Golden Gate 2012 the night before it. And that is a PWG show. And that is a brilliant match that it's incredible. It's so good. But if that match happens in Reseda, that is a 5-star indie classic in a way that is on the level of a Blood Generation versus Do Fixer match, but it happens in front of the wrong crowd and it's in the wrong building, and they get a good reaction, but they don't get the reaction they deserve. And it's just weird to think that Pac has 2 notable matches like that now, and I'm sure there's more in his catalog, and I'm sure there are other wrestlers that have that as well, but Pac in particular has 2 where you just go, man, if that just would have happened somewhere else, that could have been really something special.
Well, we're running a little late, but I want to ask this because this has been on my mind, and this is a good time to either do this. Should we reassess Pac as wrestler of the decade, of the last decade? Because I'm starting to think that this was in 2011. He was having some of the best matches at WWE when he did. Came back to Dragon Gate and completely changed the company. There's a case here that, like, we're seeing these matches. He might have been the best wrestler of the last decade. It's probably him or Hiroshi Tanahashi, in my opinion.
Oh man, that is
putting you on spot here.
Well, that is tough just because he loses a year from October 2017 to he doesn't come. His first appearance is Dragon Gate, right? And when he
November.
returns, so he loses a year, which is tough. And I don't think. Like, to me, the wrestler of the decade was Okada, and it was just like slam dunk, like, who's second place? Like, I don't even want to have the conversation of who else could be the wrestler of the decade. So I think we got to look at that tier, that second tier, your Tanahashis and your Mochizuki's, your Tomohiro Ishii's, Chris Hero to an extent, but honestly,
he lost more time.
Yeah, Pac probably has a better decade than Hero does. Now, does Pac have a year as singularly good as Hero's 2016? Well, if he does, it's his 2011, and I've been watching the Dragon Gate US or the Dragon Gate Japan stuff that I can find as we go along in this timeline, and obviously we're watching the Dragon Gate USA stuff. So if there's one year where he's just as good as Hero, it's going to be this year, and so far, so good. I mean, he's on the same level as a 2016 Hero. I talked about it on the Philly episode. I think historically, and myself included, I'm the one that champions this style. I'm the one that pimps these matches. And I think historically, we have done such a disservice to Pac for just how good he is on an elite level that just no one else is. And like I've said so many times now, when he's on the main roster in WWE, I think he's the best main roster worker there is. He was the one keeping me watching TV while I was still keeping up with that promotion. And then, we've said enough good things about his Dragon Gate run afterwards, his RED run. And there's so much good 2010, 2011, 2012 with him in Dragon Gate, his best of the Super Juniors run, his stuff in the Indies when he's not working Dragon Gate or Dragon Gate USA. At worst, he is a top 10 guy of the decade. And I don't think that's a popular opinion. That's certainly not the consensus. But also, I think if anybody knows, it is you and I, because we have watched more Pac than most people.
It's just something that like really occurred to me as we were talking just now about that. So that's why I wanted to bring that up.
Again, this Dragon Gate USA run, it's the Canada shows, which he's in 2 really good matches in, and then he comes in and is on every Dragon Gate USA show from here until he signs with WWE, and had a brilliant match in New York, had an incredible match in Philly, and then the New Jersey show, I don't put that on him. I think that's a circumstance of the venue, where I think if he would have jumped off the top rope to his fullest capabilities, he would have gone through the ceiling, and I certainly don't want that to happen. But now I'm giving him 4.5 again here, so I really do think you're onto something there. I don't think that's ridiculous at all.
I'm going to be real interested as we continue this and then concurrently reviewing this with DG, like how strong this run is that really starts in 2010 for him. Like, it's something that, like, watching this in this match that only happens here, never happens again, and you see this match, and I know, like, this, imagine if they put this match in front of, like you mentioned, the Wrestle Union 6-man, imagine if they put this match in Reseda, especially Tozawa in 2011 in Reseda having this match.
Yeah, no, it would be game-changing. I mean, it would be massive. Yeah, there's so much good Pac stuff out there that I think as time has gone on, we have really underappreciated his value, and it's such a shame.
Listeners, let's reevaluate Pac. Let's give him the respect he deserves. Let's assess these things and look at what might have been, at least in my opinion, one of the top 4 or 5 wrestlers of the decade. And I know Case, you say top 10, and I think we should all come around to like what kind of talent Pac is. And if it wasn't for what's happening right now, I have every belief that he would be having nonstop bangers in AEW right now. So.
He would be having trios matches with Pentagon and Ray Phoenix. Mike, we are missing Death Triangle right now. He would be the wrestler of the year. Are you kidding me? When he comes back, he has 6-man matches with the Lucha Brothers. Why can't America wear masks so we can get Pac back in the country? It's not that hard.
The only piece of AEW merchandise I thought about buying was a Death Triangle t-shirt. Like,
do they make those?
They do.
Oh, well, we might have to do some shopping.
Yep. But the one thing that I teased earlier that I think is a cardinal sin, and really colored my opinion on this show, and really kind of colors like the next year or so, because I remember like this kind of sticking out to me. Ronin goes 0-4, or really 0-3, and Blood Warrior sweeps. This is after they lose in the United Gate finals. I know we talked about this last week, Case, about what would have happened if they would have won. I think this is such a disservice to Ronin that it really is, until Johnny Gargano wins the Freedom Gate champion, that those 3 guys in the company are really kind of treated at the level they could have been. And I think that this is a cardinal sin of the promotion, that you had 3 homemade stars and you couldn't have had them win this going into Atlanta with some momentum. And I think that that's just one of those things that, I mean, we'll talk about it more over the next few weeks. Things don't get all better for them after this.
Swan losing to Sammy, when you frame it to me that way, Swan losing to Sammy is a mistake, because you could have had Swan over Sammy, keep Shima versus Gargano. I don't have an issue with that finish.
That one should have happened the way it did.
And then, again, it's kind of a wash because of the guys involved in the main event, but at least then you split it. Then it's not all bad.
But like,
so yeah, that's something that I hadn't hadn't clicked with me. But now that you say it, you're completely right.
Yeah, and I think that's a cardinal sin, because imagine the trajectory of the promotion if they actually had, because Jon Moxley's gone this weekend, but you would have your big American face, something they've been craving since the first show. You could have set them up over the last few months and to something better. And I think that's something that, this is going to be something for me going on that I'm going to keep track of, is how Ronin's presented, because something changed somewhere between 2010 and 2011 on how Ronin was supposed to be and how Ronin is. Some of that was the face-heel switch with Blood Warriors, but leaving them at an 0-3, completely getting wiped out in this, leading into a weekend that, as we go through these shows, it's just, I think that Gabe supposedly completely made the wrong decision here, and I think it's indefensible considering what he was trying to do with this promotion from the jump. And I think that's a cardinal sin.
Mike, I think that's fair. It's something that we will continue to evaluate as the weekend goes on. as the next time you hear from us, it will not be Open the Ultimate Gate. In 2011, Mercury Rising is the show that comes first on the WrestleMania, or I guess second this time, on the WrestleMania weekend docket. We will hopefully have a special guest on this show if things stay the way they are now. And the card for this show is Eric Cannon versus John Moxley, a 6-way elimination match with Jimmy Jacobs, Silas Young, John Davis, Brody Lee, AR Fox, and Stalker Ichikawa. Masato Yoshino versus Sami Callihan. An Open the Brave Gate title match between Pac and Akira Tozawa. Some local talent in a tag match. The Open the Freedom Gate title between Yamato and Austin Aries. And the 6-man spectacular Dragon Gate tradition WrestleMania weekend Ronin, Giant Gargano, Chuck Taylor, and Rich Swann against Blood Warriors, Shima, Naruki Doi, and Ricochet. Mike, I am very much looking forward to watching this show again.
Yeah, I know I've rewatched the Brave Gate recently, but this entire show is an interesting one. And, we'll be able to kind of track how the company is coming out of Atlanta. I mean, as we saw last year with WrestleMania for 2010, it became like one of those formative weekends that kind of sent the company in a different direction for the rest of the year, and I'm excited to see how things change coming out of WrestleMania season in Atlanta for 2011.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Yep. So that's going to do it for this edition of Open the Voice Gate Rewind and Rewatch. Thank you all for listening. Again, if you want to find us on Twitter, we are at Open Voice Gate. Leave a review for us on the iTunes podcast application if you have the chance, and if you wish to donate, please go to redcircle.com. There's a bright red button in the middle of it where you can give a donation. It can either be one-time or reoccurring, and any donations are certainly appreciated. Case, anything you wanted to hit on before we get out of here?
Nope, you nailed it.
All right, so you can find Case on Twitter at _NYourCase. You can find me on Twitter at Fujiahea. And that's going to do it for this edition of Rewind and Rewatch. And we'll be back with you next week for WrestleMania Weekend 2011. Take care.